and thank the entire committee for organizing this and for the work that they're doing. And I also want to introduce to you in the back, my friend Luana Johnson is here to support me. And I asked Luana to come, one, because she's my friend, I like her. But two, because Luana is the Vice President of Engineering. So if there are young women here who are interested in engineering and they do need to in the STEM fields, feel free to come and talk to my friend Ms. Johnson. She's more than happy to talk to you about how difficult it is kind of making your way through a male-dominated field. Please feel free to call on her today. I have had a very rigorous speaking schedule since January. This has been a big year because of the 150th anniversary of the Mass Mission Proclamation and the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, as well as Dr. King's release of the letter from Birmingham jail. So there have been talks all over the country. And I will tell you, out of all those talks, this is the one that I was looking forward to the most. And not because it, to me, signifies the end of a very long season, but because that's a small part of it, but because I have a chance to talk to a room full of girls. And that means something to me. And I don't mean girls in a very derogatory way at all. I mean girls because I believe in girl power. And when I'm around men, I call myself a woman, I do the whole thing. But when I'm around girls, it is all about girl power. And having a chance to talk to girls about my own experiences. I entitled my talk, What I Know About. And I kind of put ... because I wasn't sure exactly what I actually know about it, or what it was. But I figured at this point in my life, I may be able to share a little bit with you of my life lessons. What I call it is wanting to live life on the front line. I believe there's a front line out there where things are happening and battles are taking place, and I believe that we should have a desire to want to be on the front lines. But no one gives us directions about how to do that. How do you get to the front line? And when you get there, what do you do? So today I'm going to give you a couple of ideas to think about when you're not here. And my hope is to inspire you, to push you, to drag you kicking and screaming if I have to, into a place where you can imagine yourself being more than what you are now. You have more than you know you have. You have every talent and ability that you're ever going to need that are already embedded within you. I believe we're born with everything we need to know. And we meet people along the way to remind us of what we already know. Professors are only there to be facilitators. We're not really teaching you anything. You know how to read. You know how to write. You know how to do the math things that Luana and those folks do that I don't really understand. But you know how to do that. And so by the time you get to college, it should be about figuring out what you want to do with your life. So that's what I want you to do. I want to take a moment to caution you, because in my life story, you'll see that I have done a lot of stuff. I tend to be very busy, and any of my students will tell you that I am extremely busy, so I keep thinking there's more out there. And I want more. And again, I go back and say, I don't know what the more is. I just believe that if there's a mountain, we should climb it. If there's an ocean, we should cross it. If there's a river, we should find a way to get through it. If there's a challenge, it's ours for the taking. That's the more. That's the mantra. So we want to try to do that. So a couple of weeks ago, this is on the night before I spoke at the White House, which is a huge event for me. I sat down in my closet. And I want to say, ladies, that when you get older, and when you get married, and when you have teenage boys, you too will have a closet. And you'll go in this closet, and you'll close the door, and you'll hang a little sign out that says, Mommy's unavailable, under construction, and the men in the house will know not to bother you when you go into your secret closet. So I was sitting in my secret closet, and I realized that in 5 years, I will be 50 years old. And it didn't even sound right to me. But I had to keep saying it over and over again, in 5 years you'll be 50, in 5 years you'll be 50, before I could actually believe it. And I got out my compact and my flashlight, because my car is dark, because I won't plug things up in there. And I'm looking at myself, and I'm looking at every wrinkle, and I'm looking at every gray hair. And I'm saying, in 5 years, I will be 50 years old. And I thought about it and said, when I was growing up, every cool woman I knew was over 50. So maybe I'm actually ready. Like maybe I'm ready to reach like the half-century mark. Maybe I'm ready to be able to look back and say, you know, things have been rough, but they have been okay. So I'm going to take you on my journey today, 5 years before 50, as I look back at what I've done to get me to this place. Now, I was born, this is my after 50 thing coming, because I know the retirement's on the way, about 20 years or so. So I put that there, and I was thinking about it and saying, you know, I had retirement staring me in my mirror. And what's interesting is that you have your careers looking at you. You have your potential husbands looking at you. You have your potential children and spouses and partners looking at you. I have retirement looking at me. And retirement, for some reason, makes me think about this. This is what I think of. Fighting with my gray hairs, and my gray hairs are vigilant. They're not like anybody else's gray hairs. They don't go away, like I pull them out and they come back with friends and reinforcements. It's an ongoing battle that I really believe that I'm losing. If you follow me on Twitter, all I ever tweet about is menopause. I'm just going to say, anytime I'm angry at menopause, what you doing? I'm giving assignments to my stereotypes classes, menopause. You know, it's all about menopause. I don't know why, I just keep doing it. But that to me is life after 50. Now, 45 years ago, I was born, that's me. I was born in rural South Carolina. And South Carolina, as many of you know, is the state that was the first one to secede from the Union because they did not want to recognize the rights of black people. And that is my heritage. That is my lineage. That is my understanding. So my father moved us to Washington, D.C. We were a family of 6. I have 3 siblings and my mom and my dad. And my dad's a Baptist minister. And he was very active in the civil rights movement. And what he used to do is he would spoon-feed us talks about justice and equality. Like along with our corn and our beans, we would hear stories. And on Saturday nights, we would sit down in front of the fireplace and my dad would make us hot chocolate. And he would talk to us about, you know, marching with Martin and meeting Malcolm X. And he would share these stories with us. Now that I'm older, I realize because he was too cheap to buy television, but we would watch him on Saturday nights. It was such a joy. And we would stage rallies in the backyard of my house, and my father would say, you know, you believe in justice and you don't. What's your argument? These are our kids. We had no friends as children. Nobody would come over. We didn't even know it was going to be a rally or just hang out. We weren't sure which parent was going to be. When my mom was there, it was like a normal family. You know, she was baking cookies and doing milk, but my dad was there like we are in afros and dashiki. What the movement is coming. So that was us as children. And what my father used to tell us is that we need to be like Sankofa birds. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Sankofa bird. But a Sankofa bird is a bird that flies forward, but the head is always looking back. And I wonder when I look at pictures of myself and I'm in the yellow, almost every picture of me, I'm always looking backwards. Now, I don't know if I was afraid my brother was going to tackle me, which he often did, or if I was actually starting to believe what my father said. That although you look forward to the future and you fly into the future, it's what happened in the past that helps prepare you for the future. You are where you are today because choices were made for you before you even got here. I mean, that is your life story. The parents you had and the choices they made are what led you here. Because different choices by your parents could have had you 1,000 different places. And we never think about that. We think life starts with us, and it doesn't. We're just a continuation of that circle and that cycle that's called our family. So that's how I grew up, as this Sankofa bird, always looking back. Now, I participated in my first march when I was 13 years old. We used to go down to South Carolina every single summer. And my mom and dad used to drop us off on the day after vacation at my grandmother's house and pick us up a week before school started. Which seemed like torture, but now that I have kids, I wish I could do the same thing. A 3-month break every year. But my family would drop us off. And being in South Carolina, we used to see these white-only signs everywhere. And even though, by the time I came along, of course, we were in a segregated society, many of the stores in South Carolina took their signs and they framed them and they put them on the wall. And there was a corner store and he must have had maybe 10 to 15 whites-only signs framed and on all the walls. And whenever we would come in as children, I wrote down exactly what he said. This was like yesterday. He would stand behind the counter he would point up and he would say, I keep hoping that the world will go back to how it used to be. It was simpler, I was happy, my neighbors knew their place, and everybody knew what to do. And one day when I was 13, I said, this is not right. My daddy says, this is not right. I ran home, and I made myself a sign. I said, I'm going to protest against this. And I made a sign that said, freedom today, freedom yesterday, and freedom tomorrow. Because we had just learned about George Wallace, who said, segregation now, segregation forever. You know that from history classes. And so I'm marching back and forth in front of this store. And I'm like, he's going to change something today. Maybe a sign will come down. I'm the only one. My siblings wisely chose not. They would never follow me into any protest. They chose not to go. So in my mind, this is who I was. I was marching with 50,000 people. We were going into D.C. for the March on Washington, even though it was a corner store in South Carolina. In my mind, I was leading this huge movement that my father had always prepared me for. And my grandmother came riding around the corner. And she saw me, gave me 13-year-old marching and shouting. I was singing, we shall overcome. I kept thinking something's got to change. And she said to me, that's the day that my grandmother taught me about Emmett Till. And many of you, if you don't know the story of Emmett Till, you should look it up. A young boy from New York who went down south and ended up losing his life as a result of it, and choices that he made. And she said to me, you need to understand how the movement works down here. You're no longer in Washington, D.C. You're in rural South Carolina. Are you prepared to die for the movement? And I'm 13, I really just wanted Twinkies and ho-hos. I just wanted to be able to go to the store and not have to call us things. That's all I wanted. But it made me think. But she birthed a seed in me that day. And I said, I am. And maybe not at 13, I'm prepared. I said, I'm going to live my life in a constant state of readiness. So if I'm called or pressed into action, then I want to be willing to go. I want to be able to go. Wherever there's injustice, I want to be able to fight for it. I did not know how at 13. I just know I wanted to do it. I'm asking you now, how old do you have to be to know the right thing to do? It hit me at 13. There's a story of a little boy, 4 years old, and this is in the 1960s at the Birmingham riots. They arrested him at 4. The sheriff said, we're going to hold you in jail for every day for every year of your life. And they held this 4-year-old boy for 4 days in jail. And when they let him out, all the cameras were in his face. And they said, oh my, little boy, what do you want? What do you want? He raised his little fist and said, I want my Tito, I want my Tito. He couldn't even say freedom. He just knew it was something that he wanted. He knew it was the right thing to do. How old do you have to be to know the right thing to do? I think sometimes things are happening around us. Injustice is happening every single day, and we don't even recognize it, or we don't want to. How old do you have to be? When's the last time that you did the right thing? Not the thing that felt right to you, or the thing that was right for you, but that was the right thing to do. In many ways, growing up in D.C., you can't see my parents. It's a little bit too dark. I wanted to commit to the struggle. And I will tell you that every time I went down to South Carolina, I would participate in struggles, whatever it took. But I would then travel back home to Washington, D.C. And we didn't have the same kind of problems. I'm going to be very transparent today. My father was the pastor, and is the pastor, of a very large church in Washington, D.C. We were not struggling at all. He would talk about the movement, and we would hop into his car, and we'd go out to dinner on Sundays. Every Sunday we went out to dinner. We would travel and stuff. We were getting RVs and going out in the country. But he would tell us about the movement, but obviously I wasn't living the movement at that time. This is me, and you can't see it, but this is me as a debutante. Because despite the fact that my father would talk about struggling and being a feminist, he wanted all of his daughters to be a debutante. He said, you have to learn how to be a lady. You have to learn how to sit and how to eat and how to take care of your man. And it wasn't even 1954, this was in the 70s. But he believed there was training that needed to take place. I didn't want to do it. And I wrote up an agenda to kind of present to my father about why I should do it. And I'm like, Dad, this is a basic 17th birthday. And under that ticket is your application for the debutante cotillion. I have in my left hand nothing. So do you want the right hand? One of the days I look back and I say, I should have chosen the blue pill. I should have chosen the left hand. But I didn't. I chose the right hand, and there I am in my debutante dress with my escort singing I'm so pretty, oh so pretty, coming down at the cotillion, and then of course cruising off for my 17th birthday, feeling like I got the good end of the deal. But recognizing that when I got that, my mom sat me down and she said, I supported your decision. How was the cruise? How does it feel sailing away knowing you left a piece of your soul here? That's not what I expected. I'm like, I'm giving you your necklace from the islands. What are you talking about, Mom? And she said, well, you come from a long line of feminists. And as a feminist, sometimes you're going to have to choose the empty left hand. Because you know that it's not about the battle at that moment. It's about the big reward instead. She said, what you have done by taking the right hand is you acquiesced to your father. So when there are bigger issues that are more important to you, you've already set the precedent. So he's always going to figure out the next thing you want, and that's going to be the thing in your right hand, and the left hand is going to be the thing you need to have. Even though you had fun with the cruise, what did you lose? My mother obviously had changed somewhere between me sailing out and sailing back in. She had become a liberated woman. But you got to get it. My mother, when we were younger, she had committed herself to being a stay-at-home mother. Because my father said, when I walk down that aisle, I want to have me a wife. But my mother looked around the inner city, and there were no Head Starts in the inner city. And she went to Head Start, and she said, why don't you have Head Start centers in the inner city? And they said to her, my mother had an master's. They're like, well, you know, if you are so important and you're so tough, why don't you open the centers? And my mother turned that challenge into being a woman single-handedly responsible for opening up inner city Head Starts throughout the East Coast. And that started her career. My grandmother is a feminist. My grandmother was one of the first black nurses in South Carolina. Before Brown v. Board, she integrated a private boarding unit. She said, I was at the boarding school, they had me in the outhouse in the back, but every day I got up and I went to class. Because I knew that even if they didn't talk to me, once I get that education, they could never take it from me. And that's how she lived her life. My great-grandmother was a feminist. My great-grandmother raised 9 children. She had very little education. But her commitment is that no child of hers was ever going to spend their days working. She said, I'm training them to be more. And all 9 of her children, you know, this is the 20s, right? All 9 of her children became professors, doctors, and nurses, and lawyers, coming from Loyola, South Carolina. My great-great-grandmother was a feminist. She couldn't read, but she had a piece of paper, and that piece of paper said that our family received our 40 acres and a mule from the government. And this piece of paper, we still have it in our family. It's torn. It's obviously been wet with tears that have been dropped on it. And she went and marched into the government and said, you have to honor this. And we still have that 40 acres today. It actually includes a small town, Loyola, South Carolina. But she knew that I've got to stand up. Even if I can't read the writing, I know what it says. And I know what will happen if I take this in. You come from a long line of feminists. And people think the word feminism is a bad word. When I ask some of my students, are you a feminist? People get very upset when you might be calling them a feminist. I'm like, if you're sitting in a college classroom, you can't tell me you don't believe in feminism. Because women died and fought so you can get an education. If you're thinking about having a career, how can you not be a feminist when, if you watch the Makers documentary, it will tell you that women had to fight, be jailed, and in some cases died, so women could be honored and respected outside of the home. If you believe that women should get the same amount of pay as a man, then you're actually a feminist. Because how do you work all day for $1 worth of work and you make 77 cents? There's nothing about that that's okay. So I learned a good lesson that day. I learned what it meant to have strong women behind me. This is my mother, and that's my grandmother, my Nana, who's 87 years old this year. And every time I go see her, which I do often, she's in D.C., she said, are you keeping my advice? And her advice to me was to keep your pants up and your skirts down. You know I got children. You know I got married. So I know. And I say to you, let me grow in here, you know. She told me that when I was in college. She told me that in high school. And I'm telling you, many times, when I met a man who made my heart jump, and felt like all the air was sucked out of the room when they walked in, my grandmother's words would come back to me. Keep your pants on, keep your skirts down, and be level-headed in making your decision. It has served me well throughout my life, ladies. Trust me when I tell you, keep your pants up, keep your skirts down. It makes a big difference. I was sent off to college, and this is me looking back, because I'm starting to realize that I'm not a Sankofa bird, which is what my father wanted me to be. My father sent me to college. He said, I want you to go and get two things. I want you to get your BA, I want you to get your MRS, and I want you to come out ready for your JD. I said, okay, well that doesn't sound hard. I'm looking at the MRS. I mean, what degree is an MRS? I think that was like a degree, a master's in research science or something. No, he's talking capital M, lowercase r, s, period. That's what he was talking about. Go home and come back married. And which is interesting because that, of course, did not happen at all, nor did I decide to be a lawyer. It was in college where I realized that I could be the person that I wanted to be. That my father's tentacles didn't stretch all the way from D.C. to Pennsylvania. That he could influence me in the backyard of our house, but he could not influence me at college. If I want to take writing or take English and put my math off to my junior year, which I did, then I can do that. Because I was able to make choices for my life. That's the first time that I said, you know, I don't want to be the bird that's looking backwards anymore. That's my father's vision. I want to be the bird that's fully aware and embracing what's before me. I want to always fly into the places that I want to go. Not the places where I'm told to be, the places where I want to be. And I changed my major like people change their shoes in college. I mean, I started off, you know, I did nursing till I thought, wow, I got blood, so how do I do that? I thought I'd be a doctor, I'm like, I was like people, like it's just one thing. Until I found myself in the history department. And when I told my father I was a history major, after he hung up and called me back, I said, but Dad, this is something that you birthed in me. If all I ever did on Saturday nights, I couldn't watch TV, we didn't go to the movies, all I did was listen to you tell these stories. Why would I not want to spend my life getting more stories to tell my kids one day? And I found myself in the history department. And at that point, I realized that I was at home. And if some of you are sophomores and first years and you haven't declared your major, don't declare it based upon what your parents have told you. Declare it on the place where you feel at home. Try all the departments and the place where you look and say, I can see myself studying this for the next 20 years. That's your major. I know that. I talked to my friend Loyola, and she talks about engineering. I'm like, what are you talking? Who does that for a living? But there's a passion there. So I know engineering was not supposed to be my major. And when I talk about history, people's eyes just glaze over. I'm like, how could you not be interested? I could do this every day. And that's why I majored in history. Because I said, well, I could do this every day. That was part of my life. Now, along the way in college, I did pledge a sorority. I pledged Delta against my father's wishes. I felt like I was becoming more of my person I wanted to be. I backpacked through Kenya. I lived in Tanzania, and my father kept calling the embassy. He would call the embassy and say, take an emergency message to my daughter. And they would come up, you know, on a donkey or in a matatu. There's an emergency at home. So I would tramp down the mountain, tramp back down. What would he say when he come home? I'm like, that's not an emergency for me. It's not an emergency. I stayed in here. I worked on a fish boat. I tried to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. You know, when I jumped off over in Zambia Falls, I was doing bungee jumping before it was really safe. And I kept saying, somewhere along the way, I'm going to discover who I am. And this is me. I was taking care. We were at actually Winnie Mandela's house. And this is one of the children of one of her friends. And I said, I'm here with Winnie Mandela. I'm here with her. I'm in the house. And nobody knows because we didn't have Twitter. I couldn't get on Facebook to share the picture. I said, wow, all of this stuff was happening. And the difference between then and now is all these experiences were mine. wasn't something I immediately said, wow, Willie Mandela, Snap, Facebook, out here Willie Mandela, we're chilling. Like, I didn't have the immediate response of having everybody be a part of this memory. It was just mine and mine alone. And I think there are times in your life when you have to shut it down. And when I talk about shutting it down, I mean put down the phone. I mean close the iPad. I mean shut the Twitter for just a second and have every experience as your own. Because not every experience is one that's meant to be shared on Facebook. Some experiences are yours. Now I put this one up here because that is really the moment when I found my voice. That even though I was a history major, even though I was making these small strides and breaking away from my father, I found my voice. I found my little piece of what I felt I needed to say to the world. I really believe that when we're born, that God places things on us. He places these talents. And sometimes experiences, bad experiences as a child, sometimes kind of covers all of those talents. But I believe when you're ready, that God shows up. And in my case, he had on, construction boots and a pitchfork. And he's digging out all those talents that were latent within me. Because your talents were not given to you. They were entrusted in you to be used to make the world better. If you're not here to make the world better, then I ask you, why are you here? If you're sucking up more air than you're giving, then why are you here? And that was my point. That was my message to people. This here is my joy. You saw my voice. This is my joy. You can't see them, but these are my three gems. This is my son, Amir, who's beside me, and my son, Kobe. And anybody who's been on campus in my office, you will see them laying on the floor of my office, coming in. Look, I see Kelsey, she's my student. She's like, yes, they're always around. And my husband. But I married my husband when I was ready to get married. I married my husband at 31 years old. And I will tell you, there was a guy before my husband. I didn't have many boyfriends. People were afraid of my father. But there was one guy before my husband. He was a football player. I went to the University of Notre Dame. He was a football player. And he had played professional football, and he'd come back to campus. And out of every girl there, he noticed me. I don't know how it happened. And I said, wow, I'm going to marry him. That's how I felt. And every time he walked in the room, my hands would shake. And I'd break out in a cold sweat. I'm like, I just like this guy. I called my mother crying. I just like him. I just like him. And she said, you know what? I'm concerned about you. She said, because you're getting ready to marry a man, and you think you're going to marry a man who's making your hands shake. She said, you never marry a man that makes your hands shake. Because if he makes your hands shake, it means you're uncomfortable. You're second-guessing yourself, concerned about your self-esteem. Don't marry the man that makes you feel like the air is out of the room and you're breaking out in a cold sweat. She said, marry the man who steadies your hands. Because then you can build things together. Because then you're an equal in the relationship. And so I didn't marry that guy. Even though he said, oh, I love you, let's get married, I listened to my mother. I said, you know what, no, I'm not going to do that. Because my mother said, we can't get married. I said, my mother said, you make my hand shake. And I can't marry a man who he did not understand that. I didn't even understand it until I met my husband. And I met my husband, and for the first time, like my hands were steady. Like I felt like, here's a man who would not try to steal my voice. Here's a man that if I say I want to go left, that he will say, you know what, then let's see how far left we can go. Because going left is not always about, let's go right because I said so. That's a lesson I learned along the way. And I'm glad I took my mother's advice. Many times I did not, much to my dismay, but that time I did. And it was my husband who, when I was saying, Johnny, I want to do more with my life. I said, I think I want to quit my job as a documentary filmmaker. And I was at the top of my field, working at MTV, producing at PBS. I said, I think I want to do more. I said, I think I want to be a school teacher. And he says, okay, so now you're making 6 figures, and I want to be a school teacher. He said, well, you know what, why don't we try that? So I was a school teacher. I won the Maryland History Teacher of the Year award after my 3rd year. I came to my husband and said, you know what, I don't like this anymore. I said, I think that I want to go back and get my PhD. I think I want to do that. He's like, okay, so what does that mean? I said, I think it means I need to quit my job. and go to school full time and like figure it out. And my husband said, okay. why don't we try that? And I quit my job at the end of the year. And that job affected everybody. Because my husband's a missionary. So by me quitting my job, I was saying that my entire family, kids and dog included, everybody was prepared to eat beans for the next year, or however long it took. And so I went to school. I was 37 when I started my PhD program. And I would come home crying, and my husband would say, you got this. I've got the boys. You go and study, because we think you're going to do something. Like, we believe that something's happening. And he would send my boys in there having signs, Mommy can do that marching in, Mommy can do it, Mommy can do it. And the day I graduated, I finished my PhD program in 2.5 years. Because my husband took every distraction, all I had to do was study. When I went to graduate, the president called my name and said, Kaye Whitehead, stand up. He said, she came to us as a teacher, and look at her now. And when I stood up, I looked to the right, and my boys were standing too. And so later I asked my sons, I said, Kobe and Amir, when the president called me to stand up, why did you stand up? And they said, Mommy, you said when you started your PhD, we were doing this together. So when you graduated, we thought that meant all of us. I told my sons, I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. Trust me, years in the future, they were little then, years in the future. I said, when you go get your BA, and your MA, and your PhD, or your MD, every time you look to the right, Mommy and Daddy will be standing with you. Because when you graduate, we all graduate. And see, I didn't know that until I found my own voice. I want to leave you with this picture. This is about poetry. And when I thought about my life and I wanted to sum my life up in one word, the word that came to me was integritas. And integritas means integrity. It means living your life as if there's something more than what you have in front of you. Think about a tree. This Balboa tree is an African tree. And this tree here never bends and it never sways. See, I used to be a palm tree. And every time my friends went left, I went left. And every time my friends went right, I went right. Balboa trees never bend or sway to the wills and wishes and whims of other people. Balboa trees understand that you need both the rain and the sun. I used to only want the sun. Till I realized it was those rainy days when I didn't know my own name, days when I was hurt and I was heartbroken, days when I failed over and over again. When I realized that I was a tree, I was a Balboa tree. There's a difference between a Balboa tree and me, that when that tree falls, it stays down. But when I fall, I can get back up. My father used to say, when you fall, fall on your back, because if you can look up, then you can get up. And so I gave myself permission to fall and to fail, knowing that after every failure, there was a lesson to be learned. My message I want to leave to you is I want you to imagine yourself beyond where you are now. There was a boy, and he asked his father, he said, Dad, I want to build a boat, and I want to go beyond where the sun is, but I have a crew, and they've never built anything in their lives. And his father said, listen to me, take your crew down to the water. Have them take their shoes off and put their feet in the sand, and have them feel the sand beneath their feet. And then have them dip their hands in the water, and have them feel the water running between their fingers. And then have them close their eyes, and have them sniff out the smell of the sea. And have them open their eyes at dawn and watch the sun rise up over the water. If you do that, then you won't have to tell them how to build the ship. They will run, because they want to be beyond where the sun comes. My message to you ladies is integrity. Imagine yourself beyond where you are now. Be challenged. Be inspired. Be the change that you want to see. Be more than what you are. And when you do, trust me, 5 years from 50, you will feel as happy and as grateful and as blessed as I do today. Thank you so much.
For any questions that you all might have of Kaye. You're welcome to stand up, ask questions. Anyone?
Any questions, ladies?
Any comments? Highlights?
Yes.
Hi. How do you balance your personal life and your work life?
I married a husband who understands what balance means. I say that very honestly. I laugh when I say that. But I do know some women who work all day and have to come home and they clean up and they take care of the house by themselves. That's an agreement that they've made. I married a husband, I married a man, who understands that we're both going to work, so we have to balance. And we have to go where our skills are. I don't know how to cook, even though my mom is an excellent cook. I fought against that, although I regret that now. But my husband's an excellent cook. So if you can cook and I can't, then who says you can't get up and do that and I'll do the other? My husband hates to wash clothes. I don't mind that because it's quiet down in the laundry room. So I'll do that. It's finding someone who balances who you are. I think it's something that Toni Morrison once said. She said, when people tell you who they are, believe them the first time. That when you meet a man and he tells you, I want a wife who does this, this, and this, don't get married saying, I'm going to change him. No. I know that's his dream, but I'm going to, because they're not going to change. They're going to grow and be more of who they are. So I balanced that because I married a man who understood that my career was important. I thank God that if I had chosen someone else, living in a household where you can't be the fullest extent of who you are must be hard to do. I don't know that. And I'm raising my sons to be feminine. So whoever they marry, they don't thank me later, right? Because I'm raising them to understand that it takes two people to balance the household, particularly if you are a woman and you feel you have something to say. That does not mean that I go against women who stay home with their kids. I don't have a problem with that. But I believe it's about accepting the choices you make for your own life and being happy with those choices. Any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Kayla.
Hi, Kayla.
How did you decide from history to get into the communications world and the TV world?
She was asking, how did I move from history to the communication world? That's a good story. That's a good question. I majored in history in undergraduate, and I was out one day and I saw a sign. Spike Lee had an Emerging Filmmakers Award, and he was giving first place was moving into New York and putting you through film school, and second place was video equipment. And I said, well, I'm going to enter this contest and I hope to win second place. Because the video equipment can help me buy, go into the archives and shoot the archives and write my book. I won first place. So before I knew it, I was moving to New York and going to film school. I said, well, obviously this is something that the Lord would like me to do. So I found myself in New York, going to film school. I made a film that was horrible, my first film. But it got into the Cannes Film Festival. And it got in at the dead zone hour at 12 a.m. in the morning. And so I take my mom, we're in the south of France, and there are only like 5 people in the theater. There are 2 women in front of me that to me were clearly intoxicated, clearly. I mean, outside of that, they had bottles of wine, and they were drinking and talking loud. And this woman goes, this is the worst film I've seen in my life. I'm getting ready to throw up. This film is horrible. That was my stuff with Jackson. She was loud, she's throwing stuff at the street. She's like, this is horrible, take it off. It's very embarrassing for me. And at the end, she turns around and she says, what did you think of it? And I said, well, I made it. I really liked it. And she says to me, wow, that was disgusting. She said, well, you have talent. Take this number and call my friend when you get back. Maybe she'll give you a job because you need some help. Well, I got back and said, let me call. I didn't say anything. I said, well, she's intoxicated. Clearly, she probably could take both me and my mom at this moment. I waited till I got back to New York and I called her. And her friend happened to be Judy McGrath, the president of MTV. And she goes, Rosemary just called me. Come in tomorrow. We got a job for you. And I went in the next day and started as a producer of MTV. Even though I'm saying I didn't want to be in television, I don't know how this happened, but I ended up producing Puff Daddy's House, the Penfield Suite. I was there when we hired Carson Daly. I was there, I built out the first script for The Real World, built the studio. I mean, I stayed there for a long time. And I kept saying, I want to do more. I said, no, everyone's getting younger, because MTV has a way of bringing young people in. I'm getting older. I said, I want to do more. I want to do documentaries. And I said, I want to do documentaries. And somehow or another, a PBS affiliate called me and said, someone said that you mentioned that you wanted to do documentaries. We have an opening for someone to do documentaries. Would you come and do it? And that's how we do PBS. And my documentary is there, Twin Towers, which is the second highest selling film about 9/11. And so I just kept rolling on this train. And before I knew it, I was almost 15 years in documentary filming. Before I realized, well, I really want to be a historian somewhere out there. I just didn't know when it would come back. And I'm glad it came back when it did, and that's how I got to communication. So when Loyola contacted me to come to the school, they said, would you come to the Department of Communication? You could find a way to do history and civics. So in this crazy way, I'm trying to balance both. You had your hand raised? Yes. Oh, yes.
Hi, I'm Gabby.
Hi, Gabby. Thank you.
Do you have regrets, or do you believe in having regrets?
Her question is, do I believe in having regrets, or do I have any regrets? I just happen to have a slide for that, and I did not pay her in advance, but this is my slide about my regrets. I was hoping someone would ask me, did I have any regrets? That's how I see myself. I am the turtle that's at the top of the pole, and that sometimes when I live my life, all I see is what's in front of me, because that's all a turtle can see. And the times when I don't think I'm making the right decision, I feel like I'm at the top of the pole and I have this long-term vision. But everything I thought was a regret turned out to be an excellent decision. I regretted not going into history. It led me into film. I regretted the woman talking about me at Con, and look what happened. If I had done a great film, she probably would have offered me a job. I regretted 9/11. And how I regretted 9/11 is I worked that out by doing a film on 9/11 that then turned out to be very successful. I regret us moving to Baltimore. My husband came home one day and said, the Lord says we're moving to Baltimore. I said, he didn't tell me. You might want to ask him again. He said, there's an issue there. I believe that my next field is Baltimore. And I said, oh, I'm going to regret this for the rest of my life. And coming out of Baltimore, winning awards, being a teacher at Loyola, and getting that award yesterday. So I'm like, well, here I am at 4 years at Loyola, getting this faculty award for excellence in engaged scholarship. That their faculty members have been here for 20 years and 30 years. I'm 4 years into it. Some things I regretted, but I said, okay, it turned out to be a blessing. So I don't have any regrets. I just use them as stepping stones because I really believe that behind everything, there's something better behind it. Any other questions, ladies? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Gabby.
Hi, Jim.
While you were always striving for more, and sometimes you said you didn't really know what that was, what were some of your fears during that process, and how did you overcome those?
She's asking me as I was striving for the more, what were some of my fears? My fears were when I got there, I would not be well prepared. I feared that when I got there, I would be absolutely alone, that nobody else would be able to see the more than me. I feared that perhaps the path I was on wasn't the one that I was supposed to be on. So I had a lot of fears, except that with my father, I had learned to work through my fears. Because he would always say, why can you actually justify having a fear? People die for you to be where you are. Having the history as an African American, it is hard to say, well, I'm afraid, so I'm not going to do it. Because every time I would say that, people would say, well, what about the people who died so you could vote, so you could go to school, so you could have choices? He said, this little fear you're having is nothing compared to the fear kids would have when they would go out and march against racism. The fear that that 4-year-old boy had in prison. And then sometimes I still have fears. My new fears. You want to talk about fears. My new fears are fears with my children. As a mom, we get really afraid of the decisions we make. And I fear not that they're not going to be intelligent boys because they already are, but I fear that sometimes when I look at them, all the things that I struggle with, I see you. I'm like, wow, the things I didn't want you to learn are the things you learned in my hip. And I tell my son Kofi, hey, I want you to work that thing out. If you can work it out, maybe you can show me how to do it, because I haven't figured it out yet. So those are my new fears. Just trying to be the best mother that I can, knowing that there's no such thing as perfection. But I want to know in my heart, when my boys get to be self-sufficient, that I can look back and I can tell them, because nobody's going to tell me. Go back in my little closet, and I can say to myself, you know what, Kaye? Well done. Your boys are self-sufficient. They're good people. They're respectful women. People look at them and know there's something different there. I can say, job well done. So that's my new thing. I won't be able to go in that closet by myself and tell myself. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm Sydney.
Hi, Sydney.
It's obvious that faith has played a big role in your life, and your father was a pastor. So I guess I'm curious if you got that from your dad, or if that's something you discovered sort of for yourself along the way.
She's asking me about my journey in faith. We grew up in the church. We opened the church and we closed the church. We swept the church and cleaned the church. And I remember I said, I don't want to do the church thing anymore. And I told my father, I said, I'm going to go out. There's got to be other religions out here. And maybe there's something, my father's a Christian. I said, I'm going to try something new. He said, you can go ahead and try it, but trust me, you'll be back. Will you let me go? And I think I tried to be a Rastafarian for a while. I said, I'm going to go to Jamaica, because that's where Rastafarians go. So, I went to Jamaica. I was like, I'm just going to hang out in Jamaica. I'm going to go to Ethiopia, because Rastafarians go there too. And so that didn't work. I said, maybe I'll be a Muslim. We try that. And that didn't work. I said, well, I'll be an atheist. I said, well, I believe there's a God, so that didn't work. And I found that at the base of who I was, it was a faith my parents had instilled in me. And it still drives me to this day. How do I believe there's going to be a tomorrow? Because my parents always told me it was, and it always ended up being. So I'm instilling the same faith in them. And I look forward to them coming one day and go, there must be more out there. We're going to go try it. And I'm going to go. And trust me, we'll be back. Because I'm hopeful that we're raising them in the same way. At the end of everything, for me, my faith is what sustains me. I see a couple more questions. How much time we have? I see 3 more questions. Okay. There's a young lady with a green and white shirt on. Yes.
Hi, my name is
Hi, Lynn.
I was just wondering if you were still searching for that more, or if you're doing something for that.
She asked me if I was still searching and looking more. Yes, I started off by saying I had a very busy schedule. I'm always searching for people. When I spoke at the White House, that was a dream of mine. I've always dreamed of speaking at the White House. I never thought I would speak at the White House and have my sons at the White House. So I keep thinking, my book is coming out in June. Oh, that's a new adventure that's happening. My book's going to be out. I'm speaking about my book. My next book is coming out next June. Oh, there's a second book coming out. So it's the idea that all these adventures are happening. So I'm always looking for them. So I keep thinking, I know my work is not done because I still have the desire to find these. Yes. So one hand over. Yes.
I'm Megan.
Hi, Megan.
I was going off what she was saying about faith. I'm a senior and I'm going to be graduating, and I'm trying to look at a job that would have a chance to support it. I think how do you balance within your work life and incorporate faith driving?
She asks us how do I balance my work life and my faith and my personal life, obviously. My faith drives everything that I do. We spend a lot of time at our church. We bring our boys up in our church. We pray a lot with our children. It's important that we always do these things. I look to the Lord for decisions. I teach in my Sunday school. I set up a women's ministry class at my sister's place shelter, so I want to have Bible study. I let faith be where I start, and everything else builds up from there. And if you're someone who does not believe, like I believe, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but for me, my faith is what grounds me. That when the world is kind of falling apart, and it falls apart every single day, it's going back to that quiet place, going back to the place where I can pray and say, you know what, Lord, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how I'm going to get through, but you've already seen me in, so let me just trust and do everything I can do, knowing that you're going to see me through. So I tried to find jobs that wouldn't allow me to actually live out my faith. I don't know what was in the television business. It was very hard. I fought days with Puff Daddy. We fought all the time. And I would say, I'm not going to shoot photos of naked. Like, what are you talking about? And so he would let me shoot what I would shoot, and he would hire someone to shoot the other stuff, and then combine it together. And I said, I can't live like this. And that's when my faith had me understand, I can't do this anymore. There's got to be something else. So 1 or 2 more hands. Yes, Claire.
Hi.
I'm there.
You talked a lot about the more and the readiness to do things, like when you were 13. How do you know if what you're doing is enough, or even what you're meant to do in the first place?
I've been keeping a journal ever since I was 7 years old. And in my journals, I write down my dreams, I write my hopes, I write my fears. And at 13, one of the things my grandmother had me do is go back and look at my journals. What do you talk about? What do you wish you did? When you see yourself in the future, what do you see yourself? And I knew I wanted to do something that involved talking and teaching and being with people. Now, I didn't know if that meant being a teacher, I didn't know if that meant being a professor, or even working in a church. I didn't know. I just know it has to incorporate the things that make me work. So it's figuring out who you are. Do you know who you are? Do you know what drives you? I mean, so those questions of examine, what brings you joy? What are you good at? And what does God want you to do in the world? He what brings you joy? Not just happiness for a moment, but what brings you joy? And I guarantee you, if you figure out what brings you joy, you will figure out your career. Because if what brings you joy is talking to other people and being around other people, then working in the office by yourself isn't going to make you happy. But it starts with knowing who you are. Do the examine process. I mean, I'm not a Jesuit. I tried to do it, won't do yet. But I think there's some value in these Jesuit principles. There's some value in asking yourself those questions of, who am I? You know, what do I want to do in my life? What are the talents that there's value in that? Because if nothing else, even if you can't get to that perfect job today, at least you know what it is. And there was one more hand. I want to put up this screen before, and at the bottom here, I have my email address. And I think on your table you have my Twitter handle. But I want to invite you to email me if you have questions. I mean, if you feel that you have lost your way, you can throw out a safety net. And I may not be able to get you back to shore, but at least I can point you in the direction of a lighthouse. There are no lighthouses are out there. So feel free to call me anytime. Thank you so much.